Hey everybody, it's Christina and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be playing with some distress inks and watercolor paper. I picked up the cube inks for the ones that I don't have full ink pads for, so I'm going to start collecting those. I really like them and they're convenient. And I'm going to start off by punching a tag. I have a piece of watercolor paper that I cut at 2 inches by 4 inches, and I'm using my Stampin' Up! Angled punch tag to just create that tag top. For the distress ink, I'm using Peacock Feather, which I didn't know if I wanted it to be a lighter blue or a darker blue. So I started off with more water and I figured I'll go lighter and then I could always build up to a darker color. So right now what I'm doing is just giving a good wash of color with the Peacock Feathers in a lot of water. And this is where I kind of decided I think I wanted this a little bit darker. So I continue on just putting some more water and the Peacock Feather on there, and then I'll go in and dab some more of my Peacock Feather ink pad onto my craft mat. And when I go to wash this on this time, I will just use the water that is on my paintbrush. I won't add any more water to this, and that creates a nice darker color blue for the background. So once I have this all colored in the shade that I want it to be, I'm going to go ahead and heat set that. And once it's all dry, I take the tag and I just dip it into the ink that is still left on my craft mat and give that more splattered look for the background. And then I'll heat set that one more time. Once that's all dried, I just set it aside to continue drying. I want to make sure it's nice and dry because I plan on doing some embossing later on. And if it's still a little damp, the embossing powder will still stick to the tag. The next thing I'm doing is I'm going to take another piece of watercolor paper, and I'm using, this is the Tim Holtz watercolor paper, which is what I also used for my tag, and I'm doing a good wash of water on this as well. For this part, I want it to be more of a faded color. I don't want it to be very strong. I knew I just wanted to keep this very soft colored, so I'm going to use more water for this one. I'm going to use the Scattered Straw Distress ink, which I have in the full pad, and I'm just again dabbing that onto my craft mat and then adding some water to my brush and then picking up the color. For this, what I'm doing is just creating a diagonal kind of painted look to it. I want to see the strokes in the different kind of some of the white peeking through on the cardstock. I didn't want it to be a full wash, a solid color of ink. I wanted to have that kind of stroking look of the watercolor. And you can't see it really well even in the photos that I show at the end of the video, but in real life you can really see the strokes on this. So once I have this filled in, I'm going to go ahead and heat set this as well and dry it up. And then I'm going to do some die cutting. I have my Simon Says Stamp Rectangles die, which I use these dies all the time. I love them. They're the stitched ones. And I'm using the second largest die for this. And I'm kind of picking the area where you can see most of the strokes with the Scattered Straw Distress ink. Once I have that die cut, I'm going to pick some paper from this basic gray paper collection, a 6x6 pad. And I love this floral print. So I'm going to use that with the largest of the rectangle dies. And that rectangle measures just about 3 or 4 by 5 1/4. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my tag and I'm going to do my stamping on this one. And for this, I'm going to be doing some embossing. And I apologize if you guys hear lots of noise in the background. We're getting a nice sized snowstorm, so we've been doing a lot of shoveling and snow blowing and all that kind of stuff. And the plow's been going by quite often. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and take a stamp from the Soaring for You stamp set by Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to stamp out 2 clouds, and I used the chalk frost, what is it called? Frost white chalk ink, because I wanted to I wanted to be able to see what I was doing, and although I really couldn't end up not being able to see it, my ink pad is starting to dry up a little bit. But I wanted to try to see where the ink was going, and I'm just going to sprinkle on some of the Hero Arts white embossing powder. This is one of my favorite embossing powders, and for the texture of the cardstock and the embossing, some of that blue kind of peeks through. It gives a lot of texture look to the clouds, so you really get a nice look to those. I didn't want it to be, a solid stamp, so I knew that with that textured cardstock from the watercolor paper, it was really going to give a nice look to it. I decided I needed to add one more cloud to my background here because it just needed to fill it in a little bit more. So I stamped out another cloud using the white embossing powder, and I just went ahead and sprinkled this on. This piece of vellum I'm actually going to use for my sentiment in a little bit, so you'll see that in a second. So I'm just going to heat emboss that white embossing powder, and now I'm ready to do some more stamping. I'm using the Scattered Straw Distress ink, which this is a dye-based ink, so you're not going to get a perfect stamped image. And I'm just stamping out some of the kites that are also in that stamp set. I stamped out 4 of them. I'm really only going to use 3, but I wanted to stamp an extra one just in case I messed up with my die cutting. I'm going to be using the dies that coordinate with the Soaring For You stamp set and die cut the kites. So the next thing I want to do is I want to start kind of creating my little scene here. I'm going to use the tag as my scene area, and I'm going to take the kite strings and stamp those out using some archival jet black ink. I'm using the longest string for the kite that's kind of going to be higher up in the cloud scene, and I'm just stamping that. I kind of laid out the kite so I got an idea of where I was going to be stamping. So I used the longer one for the kite that's going to be higher up, and then I used the shorter strings that have more bows added to it for the lower. I'm going to use my Tombow Mono adhesive, and I'm going to go ahead and adhere down the kites, which for some reason I keep wanting to call flags, but I know they're not flags, they're kites. But anyway, I'm just going to adhere those down. I'm holding them into place to make sure they're really adhered good because it is going over that embossed section, which is kind of a glossier area. So what I do is I went ahead and added some Scotch foam tape to the back of the tag and the back of the watercolored piece that I did with the scattered straw. I peeled off one section and I took one of the kites that I knew I was going to tuck behind and kind of stuck that before I adhered this down to the watercolored piece. Once I have that part adhered, I'm going to go ahead then and adhere this down to the floral piece. Now, I wasn't thinking, I thought I was going to take my sentiment and stamp it on into some vellum and then wrap it around the whole card or the whole front panel of this piece of layers here, but then afterwards I decided I just wanted to wrap it around the tag and the watercolored background piece. I'm stamping out my sentiment that says happy birthday, let your dreams take flight, and I'm stamping that onto some vellum with some Versamark ink, and then I'm going to add some embossing powder. This is the liquid platinum embossing powder. Fabulous embossing powder. I absolutely love this embossing powder. I like using this the most. Now I did get a little bit of a smudge, but I'm just going to take my paintbrush and kind of wipe it away. And then I'll go ahead and heat set this. Now I absolutely love the shine to this embossing powder. Before you start embossing on vellum, you want to definitely heat up your heat gun before you emboss so you don't warp your vellum. And then I'm going to go ahead and die cut this down a little bit so I have a nice long strip of vellum, and I went ahead and kept it at the 8.5 by 11 piece. This is where I decided I wanted to wrap it around just the watercolored sections instead of across the whole panel. So I kind of popped up my watercolor piece. Thankfully I did not push that down too hard when I adhered it to my pattern paper, because normally if I did, it probably would have tore the paper and made a mess out of it, but thankfully I didn't. So I just wrapped that around. It stuck to the foam tape, and then I'm just adding a little bit of extra adhesive using my tape runner. And then I'll just go ahead and adhere that back into place. So the next thing I'm going to do is to add some adhesive back on the back side of that pattern paper, which is my panel that's going onto my card base. My card is a standard A2 size card, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, which is actually a 4 1/4 by 11-inch piece of cardstock scored at 5 1/2. So that's my card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Here are a few photos of my finished card. I really enjoyed playing and trying some different things that I normally wouldn't do. The products that I used in today's video are listed below in the YouTube description and over on my blog. And here are a few projects, other videos that I've done in the past. The top right is the video, my last video that I just did using the Cricut Explorer, and the one on the bottom is a shaker card. If you liked today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to my channel, subscribe to be updated for more videos. You can always find me on Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook. Thanks for watching.